All right. So, what if you in your growth journey have done something or engaged in something that now, knowing what you know now, you're like, oof, maybe I wasn't on the right track there. So, this happened to me recently. My friend and actually a business mentor in my network marketing business, she shared something, and she and I are very similar. Like, we are very identical. And that's probably why we were so successful at building a business together or building businesses together side by side for so many years or all these years, because we're very similar and we're wired the same. And we're both very driven. And we've both, in the last couple of years, been on journeys to identify and express our emotions and work through them and not just ignore them and not just blaze on by and be like, I don't have time for that, right? Like, if it's not a good positive thing, like, I don't want to hear it, right? um which has been to at our own expense. Like I said in my last episode, like, when we're doing things that are at our own expense, like, that's going to lead to burnout and overwhelm, and it's just not going to be good. So today's episode is going to be leaning into this. Like, what do we do if we, engaged in something, whether it was like a training or working with a coach that we didn't align with after all, or, whatever. Because as believers, being in a space where we are growing businesses, it is very easy to fall into the trap, straight up trap of my success, my glory, right? Me sitting on the throne, God's throne, me taking all the credit for my glory. It's very easy to fall into that. Like, look what I did, look what I'm doing, look at all this good. It's very easy to get stuck in self-reliance. Hello. Like, story of my life. Probably should have had that tattooed on my arm. Just kidding. I don't want that, because that's something that I'm working on. Because when you're a business owner, when you're an entrepreneur, if you don't do it, it doesn't get done, right? So it makes sense to be self-reliant. However, if you spend any time studying businesses and people who have successfully built businesses, especially to scale, they are not doing everything on their own. They have found the who's along the way that do things better than they could, so that they can bring their best energy into the areas that really are their zone of genius, right? And so that this is very much like a trap that entrepreneurs can fall into, is that, like, look at me, right? Pride, self-reliance, success, achieving, that seeking validation in what we create, the results we get, all these things. And like, this was me, guys. 100%. And I'm actually writing a book right now. I've been writing the book for a while, which honestly, if I could sit down and just like crank out the whole thing, I would, but I haven't done that. It's been more in spurts. But it's called Into the Wilderness, and it's essentially unpacking my whole journey that God's had me on for the last like 3 years, I would say. Like, that's been like the most intense of the 3 years of, like, you know, breaking me of certain ways of thinking, especially around achieving and success and self-reliance, and putting myself on God's throne where he belongs and not me. Shaking me of all the identities that I've had over the years for myself, and like remaking me into, you know, like, the old me is dead, right? And the new is here. Like, he's made me a new creation, and like that part of that process. And so, which brings me to the reason for today's episode. So Alyssa shared this podcast episode from Lecrae. He was interviewing a woman, and of course, right now I can't remember her name. What was her name? Anyway, she has a podcast and YouTube channel called Heaven and Healing, I think. And she used to be a witch. And so he's interviewing her, and she's talking about all the things that are counterfeits in this world, and evil and dark. And how a lot of them are actually very much supported in the Bible believing Christian communities, and how, you know, that is how the enemy works, right? Like he doesn't come at you with gnashing teeth, right? Like he comes at you parading as light and as good. And so when you're in a personal growth journey, right, which you're committed to, if you're building a business, like you can very quickly get drawn into very new age thinking and practices. And so one of those, because I actually just earlier this year, I saw someone post on Facebook about this, and immediately I was like, no, nuh-uh, like what? And like I had a reaction to it, like a strong reaction of like, no, that's not right, like a justification, right? Okay, so anyway, so don't come at me. Like you can go listen to her podcast episode. It makes a lot of sense what she's talking about. And then Zach and I had a conversation about it afterwards. He didn't listen to it, but I, told him about it. And I was like, I just like to know your advice because, what do we do when God leads us to a place and brings something to our attention that is not in line with him? And like, what do we do? Right? Like, do we just immediately throw everything out? Like, do we immediately discredit ourselves and all the work that, we've done over the years and like toss all of it out, like the baby with the bathwater kind of thing? Or, like what do we do? Right? What do we do in that situation? And so it was about the Enneagram. And I've studied that. I wouldn't say super in depth, but I did a book study on it with our team. And I actually found it really helpful. I mean, you've heard me teach about it on here and share how, I'm an Enneagram 3 wing 4. I thought I was a 2, but 4, right? But this is one of those things where identity, right? Identity comes in, and our identity is in Christ, right? Like it's not even the hats we wear, the things we do, like it's straight up in him. And so when we have some of these controversial things come up, we're able to go back to his word and examine and hold a light to it. And what made the most sense to me was, she pulled out the verse of, all things are permissible, but not all things are well, I can't think of the word right now either. Man, guys, my brain, like what the heck? Like are not good. Profitable. No, I don't think that's the word either, but for growth, for good, I don't know. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. Go look it up, right? All things are permissible, but not all things are essentially wise, right? Like, or good for us. And so, that made sense. And so, I'm talking to Zach about this, and I'm like, well, what do you think about that? And because she said the problem comes in when we're looking at our identity and we're allowing ourselves to be put in a box, which kind of ties into my last episode about compartmentalization and how we can kind of get stuck in this. Well, I'm an achiever, so of course I do these things. And we can very quickly justify the things that we're doing because that's just the way God made us. That's the way we're wired, right? And so like for me as an achiever, like the thing that really helped me about the Enneagram was it showed me what I do in a time of stress. And until that point, I couldn't understand why sometimes I would like get out of consistency of building my business for like a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, like, you know what I mean? Like, and I would get like in this funk, I would call it, like I'd get stuck in this funk, and it would take me a while to pull myself out. And the book helped me realize like, oh, in times of stress, like I move towards a 6, and so I want to like check out. And so I was able to be like, okay, I can recognize this in myself now, and I can give myself a day to kind of check out, right? And then tomorrow I'll get back into it. And so that was really helpful for me. Beyond that, like, yeah, it's really easy to justify, be like, oh, look at me, right? So I don't know, I see some of the things, right? Like, so I don't know, I'm still kind of mulling over it, but immediately I was just like, because I'm like, like, Lord, like if this is something, because I never want to lead anybody astray. Like I don't want to walk astray either. And I never want to lead anyone astray. And they're like, I weigh everything, not like weigh like on a scale, but like I've said that when it comes to things that I'm considering or exploring or learning, I have learned to ask myself three questions. And the first is, does it conflict in any way with God's word? Right. And the second one is, does it make sense in nature, in the natural world, in the natural state of God's creation? And the third is, does it make sense to me? Like, is there anything about it that feels off to me, kind of thing? Right. And so I've shared with you that just last year I had looked into, I mean, I think I shared it with you. If I didn't, I'm going to share it with you now. Probably about a year ago, I looked into somatic work and healing. And I actually talked to someone in my family about it. And she was on her own journey to be like a guide. I don't know, like a somatic healing guide or something like that. And essentially what her job is in those, I don't know, guided practices, like she's responsible for guarding the body because it's an out of body experience, like you leave your body. And so like the more I dug, I was like, yep, no, as a believer, me leaving my body, not good. Like not until the Lord returns or takes me home. Like I stay in my body. I am sealed by the Holy Spirit. We're not opening up any doors like that. Right. And so I kind of shut down my search, and I started listening to the book, The Body Keeps Score. And like, I couldn't get into it. It was really challenging to get into. But I did recently start listening to it again. Just because of this work that I've been doing. But when I had first had this conversation with my holistic coach that I work with now that does somatic work, she is a believer. And so I told her this because she was like, have you ever done any somatic work? And I said, no, and here's why. And I told her, and she's like, oh yeah, she's like, that is definitely out there. She's like, that's not what we do. Like we literally are working with the physical body of just bringing awareness to, where there's tension and where there's pain and all these things, and like acknowledging it and and working through it and helping to release it from your body. And I was like, okay, I can get behind that, right? And so in anything that I've done, like there was one coach probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago that I did take. It was like a mastermind. Like I did do a mastermind with her because she was so successful. And I was like, well, she's doing something right. And she seems so kind. Right. And I had some calls with her, and it like some of the things that she said to me, like were very profound, but there was still always something that was off. And then I started noticing just some things about like, referring to the universe and referring to light and dark, but in a spiritual way, but not in a like godly Bible believing way. And then for this next phase of a mastermind that I was going to do with her, or I think I was considering like one-on-one coaching with her, and part of that was going to be to read this book. And honestly, I still have that book at home, which I should get rid of. I thought about that. I didn't read it because immediately when I got it and I looked at it and I was like, this is very new agey, spirituality. Like this is not like, this is where the enemy masquerades as like 90% light, but 10% dark to get you, to get a foothold into your life. And so I was like, yeah, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to invest money to work closely with her in this area. Like she's a great coach, I'm sure. But that felt off to me and I didn't. And so actually at that time, what I decided to do was to get certified as a John Maxwell coach, because I can align with John Maxwell and, because he's a pastor first and, he knows the Lord and, he's not messing around with any of that like new agey weird stuff. Right. And so anyway, so like there are things that I have like looked into over the years where I was like, hard no, like that's woo woo. And I've said that so much like about like frequency work. And I just told Dak the other day that like as I was starting to learn like a little bit more about frequencies before like my friend, this is another, I know so many people who are coaches, but my friend who's a coach that actually helped me to do this like AO inner scan, inner voice reading, that is strictly like frequencies. Like that's it. Like, before her, I had, started learning a little bit about frequencies, and like I would go on YouTube and I would find a frequency, in my limited understanding of like releasing sadness or guilt or shame or whatever. And like I listened to him, and I told Zach just yesterday, I told him, I said, I maybe only did it like 3 nights. But I would go on YouTube, I would turn on these frequencies, and I would just let it like go, almost like some white noise in the background. And a couple of those nights when I did that, I woke up afraid in the middle of the night, and was very aware about like some like dark spiritual stuff going on around me. And I was like, nope, because these have subliminal messages and I don't know what they are and I can't hear them. And I was just like, no, and so I have been like, you guys, I am very cautious when it comes to this kind of thing. And so as I'm listening to this podcast, like back to like what we started talking about at the beginning of this conversation was, I started listening to this podcast, diving into the Enneagram and why it is from the occult and like the history of it and all these things. And it was making sense to me. And so then when I'm talking to Zach later about this, I'm like, okay, immediately, like I'm questioning, like, are there other areas that I've made agreement with the enemy over like new agey spiritual stuff, right? And so like I didn't find any, so that's good. But I'm still praying, like, Lord, like if there's any area where I've come into agreement with the enemy, like reveal that to me and let's shut that crap down like ASAP. Stat, right? Like right now. Because I don't want that. Also because like as a mom of 5 kids, like I guard the door of our house, you know what I mean? Like not just physically. But like especially with Zach being away, like, I am the gatekeeper, and because I am very sensitive to spiritual things going around me that I can't see, and I know certain of my children are much more perceptive to those things, like it's my job. It's my responsibility to make sure to recognize any doors that may be open and then also to close them right away, right? There have been times where our kids came home from being with friends and watched a scary movie, and we don't do scary movies, like suspense, yeah, but like scary movies in the sense of like demonic, evil, like we do not do those. Like I don't want that in my house. And it's so interesting. So last night my mom had turned on a movie and I was wrapping up my coaching call, and when I came in, like I was totally intrigued. I think it's called like Apartment 7A or something like that. My mom was like, yeah, it's like Rosemary's Baby vibes. And I'm like, well, I've never seen that movie. But I used to be like a super like hardcore, like scary movie. Like I wanted to watch all the scary movies. And then as soon as I had kids, I stopped because like, I think it was like the first time, and it wasn't immediate, but it was probably within the first like year or two of having kids where I was like, I don't want to watch these things because they're real. And I don't want to like be bringing any of that into my space in my house around my kids. And so it's just something that I've always stuck to. Like, no, like my kids beg me, like, let's watch a scary movie. Like, and we totally had an oopsie the other day that we watched this movie called Night Swim. And I swear I saw the previews, and it was about like a haunted shark that lived in this pool and like got people when they went to swim at night. I don't know how I mixed up like movies like that, or so, I don't know, but I swear. And it was about a haunted pool. There were no sharks included, but there were people who had died, and their like ghosts were there, and it was scary. And there was one point where Gabe was like, Mom, why did you let me watch this? And I'm like, I don't know. And then, I should have turned it off. I should have just turned it off immediately, but like I didn't, because got to finish the dang thing, right? Like we got to have some resolution here. But yeah, it was one of those moments like, we're not perfect parents, and it did lead to good conversation afterwards. But anyway, so then last time my mom was watching this movie, and then like about 3/4 through, she's like, yeah, I'm tired. I just gotta go to bed. And I was like, well, now I'm hooked. Like they're, whatever, like I gotta finish the movie. And, but at the end of the movie, like it turned out to be like this, they were like Satan worshipers, and they like had impregnated this woman, and she was supposed to be having like I don't know if it was the Antichrist or the beast or whatever, like I don't know. And then there was a part where they were like, all hail, and I was like, and they said it 3 times, and I like audibly was like, no, no, no. And I don't know why I didn't turn it off. I don't know. Do you guys ever do this? Like, I'm like, everything inside me is like, turn it off, turn it off. But I was like, gotta finish it. I don't know. And so I did, and afterwards I was just like, why did I do that? Like, that was so dumb. Like, I have this rule for a reason. Like, we don't bring this stuff in. And guess what? This morning, Ruthie came in and got in bed with me. She's like, I had a nightmare. And I tell you what, every single time we engage in something like this, like a scary movie or whatever, like it opens a door. And so now I told my mom, I'm like, now I'm gonna have to go around my house, and I'm gonna have to like spiritually close all these doors and, look a fool, like a crazy person, but actually super smart and discerning, right? Because we have the power over these things. Like, not allowed in my house. Like, no. So now I'm gonna have to walk around and do that probably tonight, like after the kids go to bed, and just praying special prayers over them. Anyway, so if you're ever watching a movie and you're starting to get that feeling inside and you feel uncomfortable, like just turn it off. Don't be like me. Turn it off, because there are consequences, and we don't want to be, as mothers, the ones that open doors. Anyway, so there are things in my life that now I am, I'm kind of looking back and starting to question. And so I'm still not sure where I am on the Enneagram thing, because I'm talking to my husband, and he's like, because I said, I was like, Paul wasn't like going around like, working on himself and trying to be a better version of himself. Like, he was literally a new creation, right? The old had passed away and the new had come. And I'm like, so, and it's almost like, okay, as a coach, like, what am I going to like throw my whole business and career away because of this? Like, I don't know. Because again, like, I want to follow the Lord no matter what. And like, if that means throwing my business away, like, I will. You know what I mean? Like, I know it's that crazy. Like, I'm that crazy. Like, I'm that committed. Like, I want to do God's will. I want him to use me, and whatever that looks like. And anyway, and he's like, yeah, except for Paul was specifically audibly given instructions of exactly what to do and where to go and when. And now that's not to say that, God doesn't do that to us now, but it's not always, that clear or that specific. I don't know. If I'm wrong on that, please correct me. But he's like, no, I think that, we have to grow. Like, we need to be committed to growth, and God puts, things in our path and people in our path, and, and tools in our path to help us to basically get over our dang selves, right? Less of me, more of him. And so, Zach's like, no, I don't think that, you should throw it all out, or like, like have a public announcement of like, I'm so sorry, like I led you astray. Like, no. However, like, we always need to weigh things. We always need to examine them against the word. We always need to practice discernment. And I will say, I think one area that I think God has, been convicting me in, or just like putting on my heart lately, is that like just having a group of advisors, older, wiser, more discerning, solid in their faith, in the word every day, right? Like seeking the Spirit, listening to him, like that is one area. Like, I have a few key advisors, but in my self-reliance and need for success and all those things, like, that is one area where I have not slowed down to seek advice in things, or seek wisdom or help with discerning. and sometimes even not with my husband. And so that's one area where God is convicting me now to really slow down, again, pace, and seek that godly counsel. And that, our world and marketing specifically and selling can be very like high pressure, like urgent. I mean, we're taught in sales to create urgency, right? Or nothing's ever going to happen. Like no one's going to take action. And I think that that's something that, I don't know, when I think of how I build a business, and like I have never been high pressure, massive urgency. I have always been, it's more about like that heck yes, like when it feels aligned and it feels good, there's no need to create urgency because it feels aligned and it's a heck yes, right? Like any of the decisions that I have been able to make because I've had that heck yes, this feels so aligned and so good. There was no pressure. Honestly, there was not even a sale going on. And I was like, I want to work with you. How can I work with you? Right. Or like, I think you can help me, like, show me what's the best way. Right. And like clients that I've had come to me, same thing. It's like, okay, how do I work with you? And, so I think that that's also more where I'm leaning now of like, I'm a woman, I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm a believer. The way I build my business is not going to look like the rest of the world, and it shouldn't. And if it does, that might be a problem. So I would love to hear your feedback and comments on this. So please leave reviews. Please send me DM Chelsey_Noel, and let's keep this conversation going. Take care, guys.